Hey guys, I'm here today to teach you about Jewish teachings. First, we have to talk about their holy book. It is called the Hebrew Bible. If you are Christian and listening to this, or if you just happen to know a lot about Christianity, this is different than the book you're thinking about as the Bible. Usually, if someone says the Bible, they're talking about the Christian Bible, the Christian holy book. This is not that. This is the Hebrew Bible. Another name for the Hebrew Bible is the Tanakh. So I don't want to confuse anyone, so in the future, I'm just going to say Tanakh. This is the word that most Jews use, is the Tanakh. So the Tanakh is the holy book of the Jews. Let me go back just a little bit. The Christian Bible, I talked about this before. So the Christian Bible is broken up into two books. There's the Old Testament and the New Testament. So just a little bit for you to know about Christianity. Christianity comes out of the Jewish faith. And a whole lot of this stuff is all the same as the Tanakh. It's in a slightly different order. Like, let's say in the Tanakh, the books are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe in the Old Testament, they're 2, 4, 3, 5, 1. But all the books that are in the Tanakh are also in the Christian Old Testament. But the Christian Old Testament has some other books too. It's not only the Tanakh. And then after all this stuff happened, that's when Jesus came along and a new religion started about Jesus. And that's when they made the New Testament. But anyway, we're not talking about Christianity right now. We're talking about Judaism and the Tanakh. Let me erase all that. Okay. The Tanakh has 3 parts. Part 1 is the Torah. We talked about this already. Tell me right now, stop, think to yourself, what are the 5 books of the Torah? Right. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Genesis talks about the creation of earth. The creation of earth. Inside Genesis is also the story of Noah. I'm not going to get too much into that story, but if you know these stories, you know who Noah is. There was an ark, there was a great flood, all that good stuff. That story is in the book of Genesis. Also, Abraham is in Genesis. Then Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob has his 12 sons. All of this is in Genesis. After Genesis comes Exodus. The Exodus, also in Genesis is when they left Canaan to go to Egypt and they were enslaved, all that stuff, all that happens in Genesis. Then when Moses comes along, that whole story of Moses, everything else from Moses Everything we covered in the last story was in Exodus. After Exodus, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. These are 3 books full of rules. They're just rules. It's commandment after commandment after commandment, rule after rule after rule, telling you how you're supposed to live your life. So that's the Torah. After the Torah comes the prophets. Let's put Tanakh. The Tanakh. First was the Torah, then the prophets. What is a prophet? I hope somebody knows what a prophet is. A prophet is a person that is believed to be sent straight from God to spread truth to the people. That's what a prophet is. And book 2 is full of the writings of the prophets and books about the prophets. Then we have book 3, which is the writings. Sorry, that should be a capital. The writings. I'm going to put Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The prophets, books of prophets, and books about prophets. Then we've got the writings. There's supposed to be an S there. In the writings, we have Psalms, we have Proverbs, and we have the Song of Songs. These are the 3 things that are in the writings. A psalm. What is a psalm? P-S-A-L-M. That's a weird word. A psalm is a poem written to praise God. That's all it is. A psalm is it's a poem, but the whole point of the poem has to be to praise God. If it's a poem praising God, it's a psalm. Yay, it's a psalm. A proverb is a wise little saying. Any kind of, I don't know, think of something that your grandma tells you about life. Those that live in, no, that one wouldn't work. You guys probably don't know it. I'm so sorry, I'm drawing a blank on proverbs, like examples, but witty, wise little sayings to tell you how to be a good person. That's what a proverb is. And the Song of Songs is all about love. So we've got the Torah. We talked everything I talked about in the last lecture was the Torah. Then you've got the prophets, which is the words that some of the prophets actually said, and then books that people wrote about the prophets. And then you've got the writings, Psalms, Proverbs, and Song of Songs. And all of that together is the Tanakh. Now, let's talk about law and the Talmud. Law and the Talmud. So, oh my goodness, the Tanakh has a lot of rules and a lot of laws. And A good Jew is supposed to follow all those rules. You have to know them and follow them. It's got rules about religious rituals, exactly how you're supposed to do them. It's got rules on how to have a fair society, rules about helping those in need, and rules about protecting health. What you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, when you should wash your hands, how often you should bathe. All these rules are all in the Tanakh. So after hundreds of years after Moses, we're talking a long time after Moses, these guys that studied religion and taught religion all got together. Those guys are called rabbis. A rabbi it's a Jewish word for teacher, like a religious teacher is a rabbi. And I'm talking about more than one, so rabbis. So hundreds of years after Moses, these rabbis got together and started talking about these rules and regulations. And they started, having conversations about, well, what do you think this really means? What do you think it means? And what if this happens? Then does this rule really apply? And there are always exceptions to rules. They got together and they had these big talks and they wrote it all down. And when they have these conversations, it's called commentary. Commentary. And when they put all their commentary together, hold on, I'm making sure, yes. They put all their commentary together and they put all their discussions together. They made a new book called the Talmud. The Talmud. So now we've got the Tanakh, the Tanakh and the Talmud. The Tanakh is what I talked about a minute ago. And then when a bunch of religious teachers got together and had these big, interesting conversations about how to interpret the Tanakh, they put all of everything that they said together in a new book, and that's the Talmud. That was done about 600 CE. So 600 in the Common Era. And when was it that I said Moses lived? Look that up. You should know that. Okay, now, languages. The Tanakh is written in Hebrew. And because it's written in Hebrew, and it's really, really important to Jewish people to be able to read their holy book in the language it was written in. Lots and lots of Jews learn how to read Hebrew. Jews all over the world that don't ever use Hebrew for anything other than reading the Tanakh. But the Talmud was written in a completely different language. It was written in Aramaic. And so some Jews also learn how to read Aramaic. You might be thinking, Mrs. Gibbons, why was the Tanakh written in Hebrew and the Talmud written in Aramaic? Only because of geography. The people that wrote the Tanakh in the area of the world where they lived, people spoke Hebrew. So they wrote their book in Hebrew. And all the rabbis, the particular rabbis that got together and did all this commentary and had all these discussions about the Tanakh and wrote it all down, they happened to live in a part of the world where they spoke Aramaic. So the Tanakh is in Hebrew, the Talmud is in Aramaic. And, yes, so in the part of the world where the Israelites were, I talked about this in the last lecture, most people believed in many, many, many gods. The sun, there was the sun god, there was the moon god, there was the lightning god, there was the thunder god, there was the god of trees and the god of rocks. And people believed that their god actually lived in those things. So like the sun god lived in the sun. There might be a god of coffee mugs, and this coffee mug might be my god. Now, I understand that that might sound a little silly to you, but I don't like to make fun of people's religious beliefs because they really believed it. People really, really believed that perhaps this thing like actually was a god, and they worshiped this thing. They would burn candles in front of it and incense and leave offerings for their gods that they really believed lived inside whatever this thing was, whatever particular god. But the Israelites, they didn't believe that. They believed there was only one God. There's one God. And that one God doesn't have any kind of physical form at all. You cannot touch God. They believed that God was invisible and God was everywhere. Everywhere at all times. God was always there and present. And that, to you, perhaps in my class right now, if you are religious and you're of an Abrahamic religion, then that sounds common to you. But this was not common 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago, they believed, no, this is God. Whatever the thing was, if they had a god of books, then the book was God. And along come the Israelites, and they say, no, 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 no. God doesn't have a physical form. God is everywhere. God is invisible, but God is there. And this was mind-blowing back then. Big, wild, crazy idea that God was everywhere, yet invisible. Okay, so now we move on to ethical monotheism. I know I mentioned this before, but I want to make sure you understand that mono means one, and theism is like the belief in God. So one God. And ethical. Have you ever heard the word ethics? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Ethics means right and wrong decision making. Decision making. So ethics is your knowing the difference in right and wrong. That's what ethics means. If you know the difference in right and wrong, then you know ethics. If you are ethical, that means you always choose right. It means that you know the difference in right and wrong, and you consciously made a choice to do the right thing. Then you are an ethical person. And why is it called ethical monotheism? Because the Israelites believed that God made strict rules and set in place what is right and what is wrong. God is the one that chooses. You don't choose right from wrong. Your mom doesn't choose right from wrong. Your teacher, I don't choose right from wrong. God already made those rules. God says what's right and what is wrong. And if you are a good, ethical Israelite, then you always choose to do what God says is right. That is ethical monotheism. And the Israelites, Judaism, I'm spelling that wrong. Whatever. I know I spelled that incorrectly. Judaism is an ethical monotheistic religion. It's an ethical monotheistic religion. All right. Have to teach you the word righteous. Righteous, E-O-U-S. Righteous means to always choose right. That's it. Righteousness is an adjective. So why can't I think of, it doesn't even have to be righteousness. Righteously, I choose to live my life righteously. That means that I always choose right. You live a righteous lifestyle. That means you always choose to do right. If you don't always choose to do right, then you don't live a righteous lifestyle. You can make individual righteous decisions. Let's say you are not supposed to watch some movie, but you're over at your friend's house and your friend says, hey, let's watch this movie. And you know you're not supposed to do it. And you're thinking to yourself, my mom's never gonna know. She doesn't have to know. No, I'm not gonna watch this movie. I'm not supposed to. That is the, that is the righteous decision. If you decide, it looks really good and my mom's never gonna know, and you watch the movie anyway, that is not a righteous decision. And for the Jews, for the Israelites, it's really, really important to them to live a righteous lifestyle. God says what is right and what is wrong, and you are always supposed to do what's right. The Jews, the Israelites, also believed that humans are made in God's image. I know I said this yesterday, but it's important. And because we're like little miniatures of God walking around on the streets, like every single one of us is an individual little copy of God, we are supposed to respect ourselves and respect other people. You should always treat other people how you want them to treat you, with ultimate respect and trust and honesty, because we're all made in God's image. That's what the Jewish religion teaches. And because of that, you should always be kind to one another. You should always be honest with one another. You should always criticize cruel leaders. And you should always fight for justice. What is justice? Justice is fairness. If, I don't know, some teacher is always really, really nice to the boys and always really, really mean to the girls, then that's not justice. And the Jewish faith says that you should fight for justice. Just a little, tiny little bit more. The Sabbath is the holy day. Or, I mean, it's not a holy day. It's a day of rest. It's the 7th day of the week. Just like most of your parents probably have the weekend off. And that kind of started as a religious thing, because religious people wanted to have one day a week where they're not supposed to work. The Jews, they believe they're not supposed to work on this day. They spend the day studying the Tanakh and the Talmud and praying. And it's Saturday, because the first day of the week is Sunday. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. 7th day of the week is the day of rest. And the day of rest is called the Sabbath. The Jews, modern day Jews, all Jews for all the time, but also 2020 right now, modern day Jews have a really, really strong tie to the promised land, because they believe their people have a covenant. A covenant is a promise. Promise. They believe they have a covenant with God, that this is their land that was given to them directly from God, and this is their land where they belong. And they have a very, very strong attachment to that land, even if they've never been there before. Kind of like, I don't know, well, we're an international school. Any one of you that is not a Kazakh citizen, do you have, like, in your heart, do you have feelings for the country that your parents were born in? Like, I'm sure there's someone that I'm talking to right now that is Russian and you're living here. Do you have emotions for Russia? Do you feel emotional about Russia? How about the Koreans in my class? You're living in Kazakhstan, but you emotionally feel very connected to Korea, right? Well, that's how Jews worldwide, everywhere, they feel about the promised land, because they have been told their whole lives that this is their land. God gave this land to them and their people directly. God to Abraham, to Abraham's descendants, the Israelites. Okay, we're all finished. I hope you enjoyed it. Please take your notes. Please submit your notes to me. And then we're going to talk about it in class the next time I see you. Bye.